Yeah, it's hovering at about 10 degrees here, maybe less.
Amazing. Well, the Prime Minister and Premiers have developed a plan to deal with the 25% tariffs President-elect Donald Trump is set to impose on all Canadian goods next week after he is sworn into office. Now, from Montreal, this is Night Talk, episode 16. I'm Gary MacDonald.
And I'm Eddie Kalik, as usual, on assignment, and this time I'm in Winter Haven, Florida.
Now, Eddie, just before we went on air, you were telling me that it's kind of like really living up to its name.
It is. You know what? We're trying to winter down south for the first time, and I tell you what, Florida's been pretty cold of late, and I don't think it got over 10 degrees, if that, today. So it's been very overcast and a little chilly. My hands are a little cold, Gary. I'm kind of missing home. It's probably warmer there, right?
No. No, not at all. And we're on the cusp of another polar vortex coming into the weekend. So anyway, well, Eddie, you know, it's been a really busy week. And today in particular, we had the 13 premiers meeting with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau and senior cabinet ministers, and of course developing a plan of action to offset next Monday, when Donald Trump's sworn in as the 47th president of the U.S. And he has, I think, 100 executive orders ready to enforce on the first day, including a 25% tariff on all goods coming from Canada into the U.S. Now, there's cohesion within, from what I'm gleaning from today's event or meeting, there's cohesion to a degree. But there are a couple of holdouts, or at least one in particular, who is stepping back a bit. And she was the one who really gave this segment its name the other day. And that's Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. Smith actually went to Florida on the weekend, and she met with none other than President-elect Donald Trump at Mar-a-Lago, and had at least a brief conversation with him about the proposed tariffs that he's threatening to impose on Canadian goods as of Monday. She was there with none other than Shark Tank celebrity, I guess, Kevin O'Leary, and I'm kind of scratching my head over that, but she explained it in a news conference on Monday that she actually went at the invitation of O'Leary, and she had a bit of a business relationship with O'Leary from back, I think it was in the fall. She was saying that he announced he was planning to build a $70 million, I think it was some kind of a data center or something like that in Alberta. And then all of a sudden she gets the invitation to go to the Mar-a-Lago and meet with the U.S. President Trump, or President-elect Trump. And the other side of it is O'Leary seems to be quite open to some kind of economic union, if you will. And I heard somebody today float the idea of, similar to what the European Union has, with a, one currency and that kind of a financial arrangement. Frankly, I think Kevin O'Leary is in it for Kevin O'Leary. Full stop on that. Just in it for Kevin O'Leary.
Exactly.
Anyway, she's really concerned in the fact that there's a large amount of oil and gas that flows every day from Alberta into the U.S. And it's a huge chunk of change that we're talking about here. And she is somewhat concerned about the Fed stepping in and imposing some kind of a tax, energy tax, on any of that oil and gas going south of the border, which could, affect in the long run Alberta's economy as far as generating revenues. So she held a news conference on Monday, and you could tell she was fighting some kind of a cold or the flu or whatever. But I'll give her full marks. She went probably about 40 or 45 minutes answering questions after giving a brief statement. And here is some of what she said.
I think we need to be prepared that tariffs are coming. That seems to me I think we've all seen the biggest irritant to the United States are trade deficits, which they believe they have. I don't actually believe they have a trade deficit. When you take out energy, we actually buy more goods and services from the U.S. than they buy from us. I'm happy to make this national bank report available to anyone who wants it, that shows we actually have $58 billion in a trade deficit with the Americans when you take energy out. I'm very concerned about a leadership vacuum. That's why I've been calling for an immediate election, because we need somebody at the table who is able to engage with the administration saying, you got a 4-year mandate, I got a 4-year mandate, let's deal. And we don't have that right now. And what I'm hoping is that we don't damage the relationship in these final few months before we have an election. So I'm beginning my own conversations with the U.S. administration. I hope that we're able to get past these immediate problems, but I think we've got such a solid base to start on. But there is no question it would be far better if we had an immediate election, so that we had whoever it was at the table able to have that strong 4-year mandate.
She makes a really good point on that part of it, in the fact that we're looking at the Liberal leadership race, and we'll get into that in our next segment. But again, Trudeau was so selfish in a lot of ways, including leaving us as a country in a lurch like this, because the new leader of the Liberal Party will be announced March 9th. They're going back to the House. Well, maybe not. The new leader may just go to the Governor General and say, let's go for an election and get the mandate. Yeah. Or could go in, deliver a throne speech. And of course, the Conservatives, and I'm sure the NDP and the Bloc will join them in moving a non-confidence motion and defeating the new government. Now, I heard somebody today say, well, that might be a good thing for whoever the new Liberal leader is, because instead of going straight out into an election without having a chance to at least lay out a vision in the House through a throne speech, would work against them. If they go into the House, they lay out their vision in a throne speech, and it's defeated, that's a foundation for them to go out and start, explaining the vision to Canadians, and maybe turn this
part of their campaign.
Yeah, and maybe plug the holes in the sinking ship, and who knows, pull it out, pull that long shot win out. So there's been a real leadership vacuum since a week ago Monday, when Trudeau announced he was going to step away. And you have Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Ontario Premier Doug Ford, who right now is the chair of the Federation of Premier Council, or the Federation of Councils, or the Council Federation, whatever it's called. It's can't get it off the top of my head. But, all of the premiers. The 13 premiers. And he's been out in front as well. Now, he's differing slightly from Smith in the fact that he's gung-ho to slap tariffs on energy going south of the border. I mean, he's come out and said, yeah, let's just cut it off altogether, which is, it's easy to say, but it's a little more difficult because of agreements and everything that are in place to do. And then, out of nowhere, you know, the other day I was sitting here thinking, where is Francois Legault? Haven't heard anything from him of late. And today he comes out with an op-ed piece in a paper in the U.S. and says, you know, the U.S. is benefiting, especially the East Coast, the Northeast, from cheap, reliable Quebec power which is lighting and heating buildings like the Trump building in New York City. And if that isn't, you know, pulling the pin, throwing the grenade right into the home, what is? You know, I had to give him full marks for that. And, you know, we were talking beforehand and you were saying much the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, at the beginning of what you were saying, you know, we're in this pickle right now because of, you know, selfish, egotistical reason as to why Mr. Trudeau didn't step down when he should have, and we're in this pickle we are right now. And you're right. You know, just before coming on live on the show, we were speaking about something that we have lacked in our leadership in terms of our Prime Minister of Canada, and sometimes even our provincial our leaders of our provinces. Excuse me. They just don't seem to get tough when they need to. So, you know, when tough gets going, a lot of times they just simply disappear. And there's a lot of people that are coming up to bat, both in power today in Canada and former premiers and the prime ministers of our country. And you look at Mr. Ford. I mean, he put up his fists right off the bat as soon as Mr. Trump proposed the 25% tariff on our goods coming out of Canada, and he immediately started talking about hydro and how dependent the United States are on Ontario's hydro that's sent down to the northern states. And you know, today, as you said, Mr. Legault, you know what? Might not agree with a lot of his visions and policies, but you know what he's doing in terms of hydropower, you know, in terms of his deals with our eastern provinces, and now putting his foot down to Mr. Trump publicly, and basically, you know, saying, you know, the reason why you can take a hot bath is because of cheap hydropower coming from Quebec in your mansion, your penthouse mansion in Trump Tower. And then you're also looking at our former Prime Minister, Mr. Chrétien. I know we're going to get into this later on. He basically put his foot down and, you know, wasn't going to take any crap from Mr. Trump, really, in terms of what he was saying. We have our former Prime Minister, Stephen Harper. He also leaned into a lot of the rhetoric and a lot of the stuff that Mr. Trump has been saying, making absolutely no sense in terms of this being a beneficial thing for the United States at the expense of Canada. Both countries will suffer as a result of this, right? And then you're looking at the former leader of our Green Party, Elizabeth May. Oh man, did she tear him a new one last week? But you know what? She matched rhetoric with quasi-rhetoric, but she was very accurate in terms of what she was trying to convey as a message in terms of you know, Canada being a proud sovereign state. And you know, you kind of try to read between the lines. You know, when you mentioned Doug Ford was not threatening, but I think he was throwing some rhetoric and saying they're going to flip the switch, basically, and let's turn the power off and see what happens. I mean, you know, you look at, I mean, warfare. It could be done in different ways and perceived different ways, right? You have military warfare, which we're all very familiar with, and then you look at what Mr. Trump is trying to propose or trying to do. To basically push Canada economically to whatever, become 51st state of the United States, whatever. Wouldn't that be considered economic warfare? We're just not using guns and bombs. We're going to be using the power of the almighty US dollar to bring a sovereign nation to its knees. I mean, you know, a lot of scholars worldwide can look at this and declare this as an economic war against a sovereign country of Canada. So there's different opinions from all over the place depending on who you talk to and where they come from, and have they lived in Canada, have they not lived in Canada. So it's really becoming a cesspool of just bombs being lobbed back and forth. But I'm very proud that our leaders are taking a stand to some of the things that are being suggested by Mr. Trump, except, I'm sorry to say, Mr. Trudeau.
Well, there's a real leadership vacuum at the federal level. Now, we know that Dominique LeBlanc is working behind the scenes on the file. We know that Melanie Joly, again, working behind the scenes on the file. But overall, there has not been that one voice, that one face of the efforts at a federal level. There have been two voices at the provincial level. Again, Danielle Smith from Alberta and Doug Ford from Ontario. And as I say, Doug Ford is like a street fighting politician kind of individual. And he was the first to just say, you're threatening my province, you're threatening my country, and it's not going to happen. We're going to fight back. And what does he show up with today?
Yep.
At the Premier's meeting? Bought a hat done in blue, same style as the MAGA hats, with Canada, it's not for sale. And I was just thinking about that, the blue with the white lettering and everything. It looked more like really Toronto Maple Leaf colors, and we all know what that's.
True.
But in all seriousness, he was sending a message, and he is, like, as I say, a scrapper, just one of these old style political scrappers, and he's up for a fight, and he's not going to let Trump and his squad roll over Ontario, nor is he going to allow them to roll over Canada as well. Smith is taking a slightly less aggressive tone. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe today, I watched him briefly following the meeting. He's taking somewhat of a, low-key approach to it. He's backing the country, but he's still concerned about the energy, potential energy taxes and taxes on potash, that kind of thing. Newfoundland, Newfoundland Premier. Oh my God, his name just escapes me. I can see his face. It'll come to me. He was on today. He says, I know that it could create some issues, but he's on board. So you have the rest of them coming on, but there's still no real leadership being shown by Trudeau. And you know what? He's still getting paid. He's not finished yet. He does not step down as prime minister until the new leader is chosen. So he still has like 6 weeks, a little more than 6 weeks maybe, and he has a job to do. Frankly, I don't see him doing that job at the moment, and we still have that vacuum.
Yeah, quite frankly, you know what? If he wants some sort of a legacy to follow him out of his tenure as Prime Minister of Canada, a good legacy, you know what? He's got a few weeks left to go, 6 weeks to 7 weeks, before he inevitably hands over the reins to his successor of the Liberal Party. You know what? It would have been a great opportunity for him to be leading the charge of the 13 ministers of our provinces and territories, taking the actual lead on this. Even though Mr. Ford is the chair of this particular committee of Team Canada, he should be a lot more upfront in terms of face, social media, or whether it's news media, paper media, internet, or even our networks. He should be at the forefront, leading the rest of the team, and he seems to be taking a back foot on this approach, where he's letting everybody else lead this. And Gary, you're absolutely right. He is the Prime Minister of Canada until he's not. And I think he should show some mettle and true leadership in terms of driving Team Canada and oppose and make the life of Team USA miserable in terms of their venture and whatever they're trying to accomplish through this 25% tariff on our goods here. And he's just not doing it. Maybe it's his personality to be passive like this when the going really gets tough. I really don't know. I'm disappointed. I'm rooting for him to do the right thing, but with every passing day and it's already a week after he announced his resignation, it's almost like, Aor from Winnie the Pooh, oh, woe is me type of thing,
Yeah.
That's not the time for this now. He's got to stand up and stand up for the country. He's just not doing it yet. So
I have two more clips to play, and then I'm going to throw, as we were talking, something else that came to mind, another little twist into it. But here's Doug Ford last week at a news conference where he was pitching, in amongst all of this, he was pitching Canadian-American approach to mining and metals and coming together. So, but when he was asked about the whole situation, here's what he said.
We have to use all the tools possible when our country's under attack economically, when our province is under attack economically. You just don't roll over. Maybe I come from a different school. I believe in negotiating through strength, not weakness.
Negotiating through strength, not weakness. Says it all. And now one other clip from Danielle Smith from the news conference the other day, where she was laying out Alberta's position.
Yesterday, Foreign Affairs Minister Melanie Joly talked about, she was asked specifically if in negotiations with Trump, Canada would consider an energy embargo on the United States. And I want to, as leverage, what do you think? What do you make of what she said?
Well, first of all, it's oil and gas is owned by the provinces, principally Alberta, and we won't stand for that. And you should never, ever threaten something you cannot do. And I would encourage the minister to look at a map of where Line 5 goes. Line 5 comes down through Michigan to get to Sarnia. And then that feeds the bulk of the supply needed for Ontario and connects with Line 9, which feeds the bulk of the product needed for Quebec. And so if you cut off that line, you are cutting off Ontario and Quebec. So I would encourage the ministers to either understand how our integrated pipeline system works and start looking at ways that we would be able to practically respond, because there's no point in making empty threats that cannot be executed on. So there are other things, I'm sure, that that we'll all talk about collectively, but let's just remember how integrated our markets are with the Enbridge system, the TC Energy system, that we have a product going back and forth across the border every single day. And we cannot do anything that harms Canadians in such a substantial way. So I just don't take that as a credible threat. I'm sure that the U.S. administration won't either. So we should talk about things that we actually can do as opposed to empty threats.
I think sometimes we're too nice. Way too nice.
Yeah.
So let me.
Well, you kind of.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just saying, I mean, listening to that clip, you kind of see her trying to veer towards a more aggressive approach. And just before she gets to that point, she kind of go back on the diplomatic side of it in terms of,
Yeah.
being the negotiating type and let's work together. And I think on a second occasion, she veered back to being a little bit more protective. And then she veered back and let's work as a team and so on and so forth. And you know what? I think she's sending out a subtle message that she's not going to be messed with. A. B, she's sending a subtle message to Ottawa and basically saying, I'm somebody to be reckoned with, right? And then her visit down to Florida, it also clearly demonstrates to Ottawa that she's got the best interests of her constituents in Alberta. And I think she firmly believes that whatever she's doing in Alberta is going to be beneficial for Canada. Regardless of what she ends up negotiating from a state to state level with the United States in terms of power, and how often are they going to turn the pipelines off? Yes or no? Who knows? But I think she was very, very clear that she's someone that's going to have to be reckoned with by the American government and also our premiers in our provinces. She's clearly sending a message, just like Mr. Ford did.
So, coming back around to that vacuum of leadership at the federal level, let me throw this in. Aside from Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre suggesting that Canada is not for sale at one point, aside from NDP leader Jagmeet Singh suggesting, pretty much the same thing, and I'm not sure about Yves-François Blanchet. I haven't really heard a lot from him other than he stood up for Quebec and Canada. And I was really quite pleasantly surprised to hear Quebec and Canada. But really, the three of them, and Elizabeth May did, with her statement, and it was pretty hard-hitting, no question. But why are they not suggesting to the Prime Minister, we're all here, what can we do to help you, help Canadians, and put this thing to rest for the benefit of Canadians and our American neighbors, who a lot of them bought into Trump's rhetoric during the election campaign, and all of a sudden they're all beginning to realize, oh, wait, this is not what he said it was going to be. But where at least make the offer. Now, maybe they have quietly behind the scenes, although I'm not so sure about that. I think there's that much bad blood coming out of the House of Commons and question period and everything over the last couple of years that they're not there. But the thing of it is, they are leaders of parties representing Canadians. They've had Canadians who voted for them and put their faith in them to do what's best, not only for the person voting for them, but for the country as a whole. Mm-hmm. And is this not a point in time where all parties should be on board, and the opposition parties, the leaders standing behind the Prime Minister, which is tough if the Prime Minister is nowhere to be found, but standing behind the Prime Minister and saying, we're all in this together and we are here to fight for and do what is best for all Canadians. You put the partisan politics aside. I don't see that. And again, that goes back to especially the last 2 to 3 years have been just such
well, Gary, it's not just
I'm at a loss for words. It's just been so ugly, partisan. I guess. Yeah.
Just pure absolute partisan politics without any regard for the country that actually put you in power. And you're absolutely right. I would have expected, I mean, you and I both talked about this, about Poilievre. This is an election for his to lose, either by, some of the stupid rhetoric that comes out of his mouth during question period or, during media scrums. But even saying, all they seem to be doing of late, they're just, I don't know if they're, like vultures circling a carcass on the ground someplace where every opportunity they get, they'll continue to speak party partisan policy, and just continue pecking on a wounded animal on the ground, which is Mr. Trudeau right now. I'm sorry, I agree with you 100%. This is not time for this. This is time to rally the troops, rally with the team, and work bipartisan, and do what's best. Do what's best for this country. And like I was saying, the divisions we seem to be forming up here in terms of our government parties and our government leaders, our Canadian leaders, they just don't like to play together, and there's really not a good reason for it. It's all about partisan politics, and it's pretty much the same thing in the United States over the last 10 to 12 years. It's all about partisanship and what's best for the party and what's best for the pocket and whatever else. And we're also seeing a lot of this happening in a lot of European countries. So I really hope this is just a horrible trend that at some point it's going to peter out. But since you and I here are talking about the well-being of you and I and Canadians, Poilievre, Singh, stop flying around like darn buzzards. Think about the country. Do what's the right thing for the country and support the Prime Minister, even if he's down and kicked about a little. Give him the support he needs, because look, the premiers of the provinces across the country need that type of leadership as well. And I think quite honestly, what we seen in the clips you've shown here in terms of Danielle Smith and Ford and even Mr. Legault. You know what? If the federal government is not going to put on its big boy pants and do something and take a position, you know what? I'm really happy to see that the premiers are doing exactly that. And shame on the federal government, shame on our federal leaders for not doing what they're supposed to be doing at a very critical time in our history, as a matter of fact, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And before we go any farther down the road, if you have a comment, if you agree with what we're saying, disagree, you have some ideas as to how we could make our views known to the U.S. and make them realize, and Trump realize that he's going down the wrong road, then by all means leave a comment. We'll bring your comment up on the screen. We'll have a discussion about it. We want to hear from you. So if you have any thoughts on this particular issue or anything else we're discussing this evening, because we will be discussing the federal Liberal leadership here in a moment, and we will be taking a quick look at the last couple of days before Trump is sworn in as the 47th president, and the fact that the unelected president, Elon Musk, has been dipping his finger in politics overseas. So we'll have a bit of a discussion on that as well. So by all means, leave us your comments, and we will we'll get them on and we'll have a discussion about them. We want that feedback from you. So please, and oh wow, we already have one. So let's just see now. Let's go down here, and my mouse went to sleep. There we go. All right. Okay. Hey guys, good job with your YouTube videos. Thriller Script Master. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the feedback on that. Thank you. All right. So it's going to be interesting to watch this unfold over the next 2 or 3 days and watch what happens over the weekend. But, you know, Monday, Trump says he has 100 executive orders, and one of them is dealing with the 25% tariffs on all goods coming across the board. And something else that the other day, a representative for the Canadian Automobile Manufacturers Association said, nobody's really stopped to think this through, because parts are going back and forth across the border for one vehicle, back and forth across the border into Mexico and back, and 3, 4, 5 times before that vehicle is finally fully assembled. So is that if that's the case, each time it goes across, and the tariffs get added on both sides of the border, like, how much is that vehicle going to end up costing somebody? So there are all sorts of things, and
Exactly.
I don't know. Like, anyways, 4 years of this. So let's switch gears, and again, by all means, if you have a comment, type it into the live chat on YouTube, or if you're watching on Facebook, just into the regular comment section will pop up. We'll by all means bring it up, and we'll have a discussion about it. Well, the field of hopefuls for the federal Liberal leadership has narrowed somewhat in the last couple of days. Cabinet Ministers François-Philippe Champagne, Mélanie Joly, and Dominique LeBlanc, all thought to be contenders, have said no thanks. And Dominique LeBlanc was the first out of the gate last week to say no thanks, that he's focused on the job at hand because he's handling the U.S. relations file. Joly said the same thing the other day when she finally said no, and Champagne said the same thing as well, that their focus is on what they can do and what's best for the country overall. And after a bit of a misstep last week, former BC Premier Christy Clark said she's out. Former Finance Minister and Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland is expected to announce by Monday, while former Bank of Canada and England Governor Mark Carney will officially launch his campaign tomorrow. Nova Scotia MP Jaime Batiste says he's in, as is Ottawa MP Chandra Ara. Former Quebec MP and businessman Frank Baylis says he's offering. Government House Leader Karina Gould is said to be considering, as is Natural Resources Minister Jonathan Wilkinson. Well, it's quite a lineup, and already some heavy hitters are out. And a couple of people who are in, but do they have the resources to be able to raise the $350,000 entry fee? Not to mention, there are estimates saying that it could cost up to $5 million as on top of that $350,000 entry fee to travel back and forth across the country and try and win in a very short time span, try to win the number of votes required to emerge as the leader of the Liberal Party. It's going to be a real horse race in a whole lot of ways.
Go ahead, say it.
Yeah. Now, Carney was on Jon Stewart the other night, and
Yes.
he really broke the mold as far as a tight-assed banker type is concerned. He actually showed he had some personality. Justin Trudeau was on MSNBC and CNN last week when he was in the U.S. And apparently for MSNBC, his office called them and said, look, the Prime Minister is available. Do you want him?
Mm-hmm.
So he's out, and I know what he was doing. He was trying to play to the Americans and say, you know what, Canada's not for sale. And that's fine. But he has yet to really sit down. Aside from today, he took questions at the end of the meeting with the premiers. But up to that point, he had not really taken any amount of questions, 4 or 5 questions when he announced his resignation. And then you have Carney going down, and everybody is talking about Carney's appearance the other night and how well he did and how personable he was. And he's made it very clear that I'm an outsider. Well, Mark, that's might be a little bit of a stretch, considering you accepted a position to be an economic advisor to the federal government, well, actually the Liberal Party and Justin Trudeau. And Trudeau had his eyes on you
On paper.
To replace Freeland when he cut her loose. So I don't really think you're that much of an outsider. You might want to just stay away from that. And then Christy Clark, I don't know if you heard what happened last week to Christy Clark. She went on a CBC podcast Friday afternoon, and they asked her again about, a lot of people in the Liberal Party are saying, well, she's a conservative. She had a Conservative Party membership for the last leadership convention. She supported Jean Charest. And she did say that she favored Jean Charest initially, and that she had no use for Poilievre at all. And then the host of the program pulls out lays it all out that you did have a Conservative Party membership, and wanted to know if she received a ballot to vote. And Clark kind of danced around it. And while this was all going on, the Stephen Harper's former campaign manager tweeted out on X a copy of the membership for Christy Clark, and the CBC had dug through and found a piece of video where she said she had joined the Conservative Party and was endorsing Charest over Poilievre because she felt Charest was the person for the job. Anyway, she put out a message on social media over the weekend that sometimes happens, and she misspoke and blah blah. And then the other day she came out yesterday, I think it was, and said, no, I'm out for a number of reasons, including the fact that my French is not that great at the moment.
Right.
And that's true, because very early on, it was before she even said she was considering a run, she was taking French lessons here in Quebec, spent a large chunk of the summer here in Quebec taking French lessons. And she said, I'm still not at a point where I could really carry on a conversation. And I know what she's saying, because I've struggled with my French lessons that I was taking over the last number of months. So I get it. I think
Quebec is very important to elections,
Oh, big time. Big time. So at least she left. It's kind of cloud. It's too bad she left under a cloud of controversy and questions. So we're down to what, really the two front runners. Wilkinson, I don't think you're going to see him go. Karina Gould, I don't know. She's in her late 30s, I think.
She's that young House leader, right?
Yeah. And I've watched her in question period, and she handles herself well. She does a really good job, and she's very soft-spoken, very low-key. Poilievre can be just, and she just stands up, and it's just so calming in a lot of ways. And she makes her point and sits down. So I don't know. If she's going to jump in, $350,000. That's a fair chunk of change to put on the table right away, not counting, what it's going to cost to actually travel across the country in a very short span of time to try and get the number of votes to win the leadership. She might be better off sitting this one out, building her skills a little more and her profile more within the party and within the country and in the House, and the next trip around, take a go at it, because she'll still be more than young enough to do just that. So Freeland?
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting you say that too. Do you think that our country might be looking for a little more gray hair in our candidates? And what I'm saying, I'm not saying that facetiously, but looking for more experience and more maturity and more well-rounded people who've been around the world in terms of education, understanding of what's going on in the world, and so on and so forth. You look at Carney, who's coming with a considerable amount of experience in the financial sector, and what on the forefront of everybody's mind right now is how poorly Canada's economy is performing these days. Maybe Mark Carney is the right guy to bring on board because he's definitely had gray hairs as being part of the Bank of Canada and former head of the Bank of England. So that's quite a bit of experience you're looking at there. Chrystia Freeland, by the same token, she's not a slouch. I mean, she's quite a bit younger than Mr. Carney, but she's no slouch. And being the deputy prime minister and the former finance minister, there's quite a bit of experience there. But look at somebody like Katrina Gould, present House leader, who you mentioned she's in her late 30s right now. Doesn't that kind of give you the persona of a young Mr. Trudeau before he threw his hat in the ring to become the Prime Minister of Canada? I think he was about pretty much the same age as her, maybe a little older. And I think maybe Canadians might be a little wary about electing, or Liberals might be a little wary about first electing someone as young as the House leader. And then if you put her against the incumbent leaders of the Conservative Party, the NDP, and the Bloc Québécois, she may end up struggling if Canadians are looking for something with a little more maturity and experience. So I think you're absolutely right about her. Maybe she should not throw her hat in the ring and back off, gain some more experience, and there will be more elections. And at that time, she will be ready.
Yeah. Now the others, Jaime Batiste, the Nova Scotia MP, Indigenous, he says he's raised about $40,000, I think, just over the weekend on the phones. At the very least, he wants to get his name out there and give Indigenous people, a boost in that respect as well. Mm-hmm. And maybe this is not the time for him. He needs a little more time to build that profile as well. Frank Bayless, here in Quebec, former MP. He sat for one term and successful businessman. I watched him 2 weeks ago when he said he was thinking about it. I was quite impressed with him, with the way he handled himself on camera and the way he responded to questions. And I thought he did quite well. And Wilkinson, I think he's kicking the tires, but I just don't think he's going to go. And then Chandra Ayer, MP, backbench MP from Ottawa. I watched him last Friday on Power and Politics with Dave Cochran, and some of his ideas are, he's talking about moving to the center. Well, a couple of his ideas probably for the climate right now are a little more than center, they're a little more right center. And he doesn't speak French, and he makes no bones about it, makes no apologies for it. He says, why do I need French? Really? And that's the way he left it.
Yeah.
So, good luck. He said he has quite a large sum of money left in his bank account from his last campaign for starters. And at that point, it hadn't been announced yet just how much it was going to cost to enter the race. So anyway, the hopefuls have until January 23rd to declare their candidacy. people who want to vote, Liberal Party members who want to vote, have until January 27th to register. And the new leader will be announced on March 9th. And of course, Parliament's scheduled to come back on March 24th. So that is going to be something to watch and see exactly how that's all going to handle out. As far as, will we have a speech from the throne, or will we have a leader who says, you know, to hell with it, I'm going straight to the polls? It's going to be interesting to see how they handle that one.
Right.
Anyway, you look at it, we're going to the polls this spring, because even if the new leader goes with a throne speech, there'll be a non-confidence motion, and that'll be the end of it all. So,
yeah.
Now, while all of that's happening up here, and all of the swirl is going around up here with all of that, of course, Monday's the big day. Donald Trump will be sworn in as the 47th President of the United States. He is reported to have over 100 executive orders to implement on his first day, including, of course, the threatened tariffs on all Canadian goods. He has also been making noise about Canada becoming the 51st state, taking Greenland and the Panama Canal, and threatening tariffs against the European Union. Meantime, Donald Jr. spent a couple of disastrous days in Greenland in what can best be described as, I said, a disastrous promotional trip. Down to the staged photo op where they rounded up a bunch of people, and it turns out that most of the people they rounded up,
people.
Yeah, gave them a free lunch and MAGA hats, and got them to line up for a picture or a couple of pictures. And there were a couple of other missteps over there, I guess, as well. So it wasn't all as great as what perhaps it was, they let it on to be. So
Are you reserving comment, Gary?
I am. I'm trying to be a little bit nice, because we also have the unelected president, Elon Musk, wading into German politics. If you're ready for this one, yeah. By interviewing the leader of the ADF. And the ADF is an extreme right-wing party in Germany. And of course, Germany goes to the polls next month. I believe it's February 23rd. So I had a chance to speak with our contributor earlier today in Germany, in Dusseldorf, and Christian Falk, and got the lowdown as to what people are saying, what the feeling is over there. And you know what? You might be a little bit surprised by a couple of the comments coming from Christian. So,
well, you can see Musk supports the entire right-wing populist party family in Europe. You see it already in the UK, where he also includes the British radical right Reform UK with their leader Nigel Farage. And the fact is that here in Germany, I would say we call him, or the US calls him, the richest man in the world. He appears to have his own economic interest, first of all, right? Secondly, Tesla is well established here in Germany with their production sites. And of course, there is not only political interest as a supporter of Trump or his advisor, but also a big economic interest.
So roughly 200,000 users logged onto the social media platform X to listen to this interview, and the support that Musk seemed to be giving the party in general. And he's also been tearing strips off a lot of other leaders in Europe. How is that playing overall?
I mean, you see divided reactions, of course. The far left has its own opinion about the interference of his comments here in Europe. They claiming that he is trying to influence inner German politics, which he obviously is doing. But all over, it's received quite well when you see people here in Germany, the general people. Basically, most of the people say he's addressing actually the problems we're having here. I mean, it's always from the outside. From other countries' perspective, it's difficult to evaluate the situation. But he has a lot of supporters when you looked at this at the interview itself. I'm not saying that everything is right what he has said. He's just supporting actually the same programs which you see all over the world. Look at Italy, look at the US, or the far-right party here in Germany. They're all speaking the same language. They're all having the same narrative. From that perspective, yeah, on the side of the far-rights, yeah, he got a lot of support. We don't need to discuss about the things I would say, what he said about Hitler or what Alice Weidel said about Hitler. I mean, that's a discussion on another complete other level. But yeah, he hit actually the feelings, or he addressed actually the right feelings of most of the people here in Germany.
Now, the AfD is running in second place, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Does it really have a chance of forming a government in the elections next month? At the moment,
the only way that they really form, I mean, the constitution here in Germany is quite different to the one in the US or in Canada. Here you have to have like a majority of the votes, or you partner up with one of the other parties. Yeah, but the problem is, in that case, they would need to have the full, how shall I say, would have to have the majority votes in order to be the leading party here in Germany, or they team up. But at the moment, there is no real, how do you say, like a conclusion between two parties, like trying to get with the AfD into the elections, yeah, forming up a coalition.
All right. Now, the party has also been under surveillance by the German Domestic Intelligence Agency because of its hardline stances against things like immigration and Islam. Do you feel that, or is there a consensus within the country that the party is somewhat of a threat in that respect?
Well, those kind of allegations came all the time, but in the end, it is the people. What is the narrative of the people of Germany wanting to hear and to see? You know, of course, there's always a fear that we could go back to the 30s, 40s. Here we have a history. And everyone is actually quite, everyone is quite stressed about the fact that radicalization can take place. So, of course, there's always like people investigating in this kind of direction, but it's more like a kind of, it needs to be done. It needs to be shown to the world that we care. Yeah. But looking into the UK, looking in Italy and all the other places, it's already taking place. So it's like a drop on the hot stone, you know. They will continue with their policies.
And what is we're just days away now from the inauguration of President Donald Trump and his sidekick Elon. What's the feeling now as time moves along and you know, we've witnessed Donald Jr. going to Greenland for a day or two, Trump stepping up the pressure and threatening military action in Panama over the Panama Canal, and really pushing more and more to the script of annexing Canada as the 51st state. Is there a sense of beyond chaos, is there a sense of fear maybe building within Germany, within Europe in general?
I would say that, to start with, even during the Joe Biden administration, the Trump's protectionist America First policy was never really off the table, right? Starting with the Inflation Reduction Act brought many advantages to US companies, but it's another story. But that was really never taken back by the current administration. So for European parties, like looking at now again on this kind of US first, and what does it mean for us, because we're expecting that Trump will get more and more aggressive, and it's time now for the European countries to diversify in all kind of aspects, let it be trade partnerships or the defense, which we have to say we didn't pay enough attention over the past 10, 20, 30 years. It was even said by Obama already that Europe needs to be stronger or independent in their own defense system. And again, we were lazy and we relied too much on the US. So there is still a lot of, dependence, but European countries, they're now reevaluating also their, let's put it like this, partnerships, for example, with China, or in our European economic market, like what are the intertrade relations between all the countries here inside Europe, instead of being too dependent on the US,
And that's related to Trump's threats of tariffs against the European Union, as well as he's threatened Canada and Mexico.
Exactly. It's exactly that, yeah. In terms on the threats of Greenland and Panama, let's see, it was a nice story for last week. Let's see what is coming next week in the news, yeah. But this is the reality we have to live for the next 4 years.
All right, Christian, thanks very much. Appreciate you taking the time out to update us on what's happening in Europe and the feelings in Europe with the inauguration of Donald Trump just days away now.
Thank you.
I think he wore that hat just for you, Eddie.
I was going to ask you that question. Is he trying to get Canadian citizenship and putting the Montreal Canadiens cap on for prosperity's sake, or did he do that for me? What a nice guy! But wow, you know what? It was great listening to him. He makes so much sense in terms of what the Europeans are going to have to contend with, just like we're going to have to contend with for the next 4 years, right? And the writing was on the wall. He went back as far as to quote Obama. So yes. Somebody smelled it back then, and maybe they didn't take it seriously enough to put Plan B into place. But I guess they're scampering now to catch up, just like we are.
Yep, and with so many countries involved, we only have 3 or 4 parties involved in 13 premiers, and look at the problems we're having in trying to get a fully united front. Can you imagine what it's going to be like over there? And there's no question Trump will turn his attention to them once he's finished, playing cat and mouse with the rest of us. So with that, I guess it's time for us to wrap for this week. And I want to thank, we have some thumbs up, so thank you for the likes, because we would really appreciate you liking and sharing, and of course subscribing to our channel. It's growing slowly but surely, and every time you like, subscribe or share, it helps that much more with the growth of the channel. And we really do want your comments. So if you're watching this later, please leave a comment below and let us know exactly what you're thinking. And, we can respond to them there. depending on the issues on the next show, we can bring those into part of the conversation as well, because the more feedback we get, the more comments we get, the better the show becomes with everybody involved in all kinds of differing points of view. Nothing like a great discussion. Just think about Saturday morning coffees or Saturday afternoon beer or two, and the great discussions that we do have overall. So with that, Night Talk returns in 7 days. Eddie?
Good night, everybody, and I don't know where I'll be next week.
Okay, well, maybe we should do a contest. Guess where Eddie's going to be. Anyway, well, we'll hook up, that's for sure, and we'll be in touch in the meantime. And from Montreal, good night.